I didn't mean to do that. Or did I?
So you decided to take the game more seriously, huh? And for some reason, you've picked Cathy as your new main. Well, I'm here to teach you how to become a sweaty Cathy player. So I did a bit of research on what a sweaty player truly is, and according to the most credible source in the world, a sweaty player is usually a player who goes so tryhard that his hands might as well be sweating from the tryhardness. Now that we've established that, let's talk about Cathy. Cathy is an auto-attack reliant assassin that excels at killing people from stealth and sticking onto them. Some of the benefits to playing Cathy is that she deals a ton of consistent DPS with her passive, while also having a substantial amount of burst damage with her ult. She has an amazing mid game and doesn't fall off super hard in the late game, and also she has a ton of defense from her passive shield and also the healing from her ultimate. However, she doesn't have any reliable escape other than her ult, which is on a pretty long cooldown. She's pretty trash at chasing people down if they're not in melee range of her, as all of her abilities have a pretty short range. She has almost zero CC aside from a small slow on her W and a super unreliable E. Let's break down Cathy's abilities. Cathy's passive, Under the Knife. Cathy applies stacks of wounded on enemies whenever she hits them with her auto attacks or her abilities. Wounded deals a fixed amount of damage per stack, and at max stacks, it deals true damage based on enemy's max HP. Also, Cathy gains bonus critical strike damage when hitting a target that has the max stacks of wounded applied. The second part of her passive, Post-Op, grants Cathy a shield and decaying movement speed whenever she hits an enemy with her ability. The cooldown of Post-Op is decreased whenever Cathy critically strikes anything. Cathy has a blue aura that indicates whenever post-op is off of cooldown. Cathy's Q, Double Bypass. Cathy dashes to an enemy and damages them. If the enemy is close to Cathy, then Double Bypass deals bonus damage and its cooldown is slightly reduced. The damage of Double Bypass is increased by bonus critical damage. And if Cathy applies the max amount of wounded stacks on an enemy, the cooldown of Double Bypass is significantly reduced. Cathy's W, Amputation. Cathy swings her saw to deal damage in front of her while slowing enemies. If she hits an enemy with the outer edge of amputation, then they are grounded for a short amount of time. Grounded means that enemies can't use any movement abilities, such as Yuki's Dashing Gentleman, Isol's Camouflage, or Shoichi's Bottom Line. Cathy's E, Suture. Cathy throws a suture thread that deals damage and roots enemies it passes through. If Suture passes through an enemy and hits another enemy or a wall, then Suture pulls both of them together and stuns them. Cathy's ultimate? Emergency Surgery. Cathy charges at enemies and deals damage to all enemies hit based on their missing HP, while also applying the maximum amount of wounded stacks. Cathy and her allies within a certain range are also healed based off their missing HP. Also, whenever Cathy revives a downed ally, all allies within a certain area regenerate health. Cathy has a green indicator that appears whenever she can gain the maximum amount of healing from her ultimate. Alright, now let's talk about which abilities we should be maxing on Cathy. Put a point into your ult whenever you can, just because it gives Cathy so much value. It's an escape, it's a gap close, it has a heal, it's an execute, it fully stacks your passive, it resets your Q. There really isn't any reason why you wouldn't put any points into this ability. After Cathy's ult, it's debatable on whether or not to max your Q or your passive. I recommend maxing your passive because each point you put into your passive increases the amount of damage your shield can block, it increases the movement speed that she gains, and it also decreases the cooldown of the passive itself. Overall, it increases Cathy's survivability. Each point also increases the bonus critical strike damage that you gain when you're attacking an enemy that has the maximum amount of wounded stacks. So if you're going a crit build on Cathy, it's really essential to max your passive. Next, I would max Q because it's the ability that Cathy uses the most. It has the lowest cooldown, and its cooldown gets decreased by both her passive and her ult. Her Q is also valuable for sticking onto enemies once you've gotten on top of them. At this point, you would max W, then E. just because your W deals more damage and is way easier to hit than your E. W has a much larger hitbox and a decent slow, while your E is a thin little thread that seems almost impossible to hit at times. Let's talk about some combat tips. The most efficient way to maximize your damage is by weaving in your auto attacks with your abilities. For example, auto Q, auto W, auto. That rotation alone will deal as much damage as possible and also give you 5 stacks for your passive. Once your passive is up to 5 stacks, then you'll be able to auto and Q again, and hopefully they're low enough to the point where you can ult them for a free kill. Make sure to utilize the cooldown decrease on your Q by making sure to Q before applying the maximum amount of wounded stacks on an enemy. Because your ult is an execute, make sure to use it when an enemy is fairly low in HP. Try to aim for when the enemy is below 25% of their HP. Following this principle, if you're the one who's low on HP, try an ult when you see the green indicator so that you get the maximum amount of healing from your ult. Just make sure to prioritize ulting for damage rather than healing. Try and use your E only when you can stun them against the wall or another enemy/animal, or if they're trying to escape, so it can help you catch up to them because of the passive movement speed. Make sure to use your E to root an enemy or your W to slow/ground them just before you use your ult so that they can't easily escape. Cathy's weapon skill, Cloak and Dagger, deals current health damage, so if possible, try and use it to start a fight because the more HP someone has, the more damage Cloak and Dagger deals. Ideally, you use it to surprise your enemy and try to burst them down before they have time to react. But if you're more of a defensive player, then you could always simply use your Cloak and Dagger skill as a form of escape. When your ult or your weapon skill is down and you're trying to escape, make sure to use your W or your E whenever your passive is up, so that you slow them or you root them, while also gaining the bonus movement speed from your passive, which could potentially save your life. Whenever you're fighting a bear, please auto attack the bear, press Q, use your passive movement speed to run out of its stun, then continue to kill it. Now for some of Cathy's most notable matchups. I have a hard time determining on whether or not Cicella or Emma is Cathy's worst matchup. In my opinion, I think they're both equally trash. I think Emma is a little bit more annoying. But either way, I think it's just a really hard matchup for Cathy to win. Both of them have a lot more range than you. They have a lot more ways to stop you from getting on top of them than you do. Like gap closers, all you really have is your ult, right? Emma has her bunny morph, which can completely destroy your playstyle. Cicella has her slow with her passive. She also has her E, and obviously a ton of damage. I could rant about Cicella and Emma for like years, and I wouldn't stop. So let me just leave it right here. Nerf Cicella, nerf Emma, get them out of my game, please and thank you. Zahir and Hyajin are also really bad matchups for Cathy, just because similar to Emma and Cicella, all of them are really good at kiting, and kiting is the bane of Cathy's existence. But obviously, I mentioned Emma and Cicella first, just because they're again a little bit more annoying, but all of them still should theoretically destroy Cathy if they're played to a reasonable level. I'd like to apologize to the Sylvia mains in advance, but Sylvia and Luke are just hard stomp matchups for Cathy, in my opinion. Luke, you hard out DPS him from mid to late game. Early game, you still lose, but after that, it's literally just like free kills no matter how fed he is. Obviously, like if you play it right. Sylvia's just a weak character overall, but you just kill her. The only way she lives is if she uses her ult to run away, but if she doesn't, she just dies. Now let's look at some of the builds that Cathy can go. When making a build for Cathy, there's a couple of stats that work really well with her. I think the two most important stats to focus on is crit and crit damage. One, crit synergizes with her passive, just because she gains additional critical strike damage from her passive. Two, for critical damage, it scales with her Q, so she gets bonus damage from there. Other stats to consider, attack power. All of her abilities have pretty good attack power ratios, so obviously it scales pretty well. Attack speed. Cathy is a pretty auto attack reliant character, so the more auto attacks that you can do, then obviously more damage. It's a win-win. Lifesteal is also just a very good stat overall. It kind of allows for that like sort of like drain tank playstyle, especially because Cathy gets a passive shield, right? And then she also has the healing from her ult. So it just adds on to her sustain even more. And also, a lot of the items that build out of lifesteal are just really good and really synergize well with Cathy. They all have the stats that she's looking for. So I'd always take lifesteal on Cathy if I had the chance. I have a firm belief that crit is the only way to play Cathy. I'm just kidding. Not the only way, but I feel like it's the best way to play Cathy. So I have 2 crit builds and 1, I guess, ENAD build, tanky build. So the build path that I want to be running every single game starts hotel, goes into avenue, alley, then archery range. The main reason why I feel like hotel isn't a super contested spot for Cathy players. Whenever I start there, I rarely ever see Cathys. The only people you really need to worry about there is Hyunwoo. There could be a lead island if you're really late, but that shouldn't be happening. Normally you should get to avenue before like a minute, ideally. But you can get most of your items there pretty quickly. And then you should have your weapon by avenue. And then once you have your weapon, if you're lucky, you can grief people and get free kills. It's pretty good. Another thing to note about this build is that I rarely ever build a magazine. Normally, I just pick up whatever accessory I can find. If I get a moonstone while hunting, then obviously I'll just build a moonlight pendant. But magazine is really not essential. It's nice if you can build it, but the reason why I never build it is because when you start in hotel, you require 3 pieces of scrap metal, and sometimes that can be hard to find because everyone who starts in hotel is most likely going to use scrap metal. So if you really only need 2, and then I just leave so that you can build your PC fearless and then your weapon, and that's all you need. Here we have a pretty standard Cathy build. You go dock, you go uptown, get your weapon in 2 zones. You should have 3 items by beach, so pretty decent power spike. What I do like about this build path is that it goes the Buccaneer doubloon, the new item that they introduced not that long ago, which I do think is pretty good. Gives you a little bit of lifesteal and some crit, which I think synergizes really well with Cathy, to the point where I'm wondering if they released it for Cathy. Obviously, it's still good on like Rozzy and like other characters that synergize well with crit and lifesteal, like Fiora as well, maybe even Yuki. But overall, I don't think the build path is that bad. It's nothing too special. This last build is a Karn build, which is should be pretty tanky because you have the motorcycle helm and also the Scrodinger's box, where you go factory and then chapel, and you can get those 2 items. They're pretty tanky, which is nice. You know, makes you harder to kill. And then obviously for this build specifically, I would never keep these items until late game. I'd always transition them into like more optimal items. It's because my playstyle is the more like aggressive, full damage Cathy, you know, but it's not bad. Obviously, the effectiveness of save plans change from patch to patch, so still be looking at the new save plans. Look at the most used. Obviously, they're most used for a reason, and definitely still branch out, explore, try new things. I didn't mention skill amp Cathy in this guide at all, just because me personally, I've never played it. I don't think it'd be that good, but hey, it could be. Here are some gameplay concepts that I like to keep in mind whenever I play Cathy. Console vision is key when playing Cathy. Because you use the dagger and you have the cloak and dagger weapon skill, it's really essential that you have vision on people so that you can sneak up on them and hopefully burst them. Cathy doesn't fall off super hard in the late game, so if you ever find yourself in the scenario where you're really far behind in terms of weapon mastery, then definitely don't be afraid to go around hunting animals, bears, wolves, dogs, chickens, just so you can get your weapon mastery up. And definitely keep an eye out for squishy characters, because you should still have enough damage to burst them down. The last thing that I'll say is that it takes time to master any character. Definitely if you're still struggling with Cathy after watching this video, then don't be discouraged, because again, with time, you'll get good at her. Okay. One last thing. The title of this video should have the word sweaty in it, right? So even though it says that, I think it's important that at the end of the day, you're still having fun. And we all know that the only way to have fun is by winning and crushing your enemies. Okay? So go out there and go grind some MMR.